This is an Interurban, a tram that extends outside the city to serve surrounding towns and rural areas. In the early 20th century, interurban lines facilitated the growth of rapidly industrializing cities all around the world, from North America and Europe to Asia and Latin America. But today, the vast interurban networks of old have almost completely disappeared, either replaced by buses or lost to the private automobile. Except here, in Katowice, where the interurban not only survived, but continues to operate today. With 677 stops across 29 lines, this is the largest tram system in Poland. Its story of survival wasn't easy, lasting through 2 world wars, economic turmoil, and political unrest. Yet today, the century-old network faces a new challenge, struggling to serve the sprawling metropolitan areas it once created. And despite worsening traffic congestion in the Katowice region, the system continues to lose ridership year after year. So why did the interurban vanish elsewhere? And how does Katowice's network plan to hold on? To understand the interurban, we'll take a journey back in time to the early 1900s. This was an era when steam trains dominated transport between cities. Disruptive and polluting, they were often relegated to stations outside city centers. The electric tram was revolutionary in comparison. Agile, clean, and able to mix with street traffic, it became the dominant mode of inner-city transport. Extending these trams beyond city limits gave rise to the electric interurban, bringing suburbanites directly into the city from surrounding towns. The network structure of the interurban changed the landscape it served. As the system expanded, the areas it connected experienced rapid growth. Initially meant to connect a city across farmland to rural towns, stops were added in between to facilitate continuous development. Farming communities became suburbs, with massive populations entirely dependent on commuting to the city for jobs and opportunities. It became more than just a mode of transport, inducing development away from the city. A machine that fueled the growth of rapidly industrializing cities, able to turn worthless land into prime real estate. In many ways, the interurban was a catalyst for outward sprawl. Its flexibility and short stop spacing enabled easy access from any point along its length, inducing more development away from the city. Interurban lines became so widespread around the world that this pattern of growth could be seen in nearly every industrializing city of the early 1900s, including Katowice. Notably, the once distinct cities of Chorzów, Bartom, Sosnowiec, and Katowice became one large continuous urban area. Entrepreneurs recognized the potential for profit and rapid expansion. Quick to build, cheap to run, and ridiculously profitable, new interurban lines practically printed money. But change was on the horizon. As the 1920s roared in, mass production techniques, most notably Henry Ford's assembly line, made cars increasingly affordable. What was once a luxury for the wealthy became attainable for the average family. With cars, people ventured further from the city, establishing communities well beyond the reach of the tram lines. The increased distances reduced the effectiveness of the interurbans, which, with their slow speed and frequent stops, struggled to compete with the speed and convenience of the automobile. Sprawl that was created by the interurban was exacerbated by the automobile. People lived further and further away from the city centers, necessitating a car to get around. Recognizing the growing importance of automobiles, governments around the world began investing heavily in road infrastructure. Public funds were allocated to build highways and improve roads, all while interurban companies were left to fend for themselves. As cities grew and more cars filled the streets, congestion became a pressing issue. Interurbans, which often shared road space with automobiles, faced increasing delays. The
The once reliable schedules were disrupted by traffic jams and accidents.
The personal automobile is the undisputed king of serving sprawl. The Interurban, on the other hand, was slow, infrequent, and severely underfunded.
Recognizing this, planners from around the world attempted to make their legacy interurbans competitive in the age of the automobile. In Japan, interurban lines were rebuilt to heavier railway standards, removing street-running sections to prevent traffic delays and allow for higher speeds. In Western Europe, new tunnels, rights-of-way, and priority measures aimed to modernize the interurban, birthing the Stadtbahn, Schnelltram, and the tram train. Those that didn't or couldn't innovate succumbed to financial failure and closed. Most notably, vast networks that built US and Canadian cities failed to modernize, eventually replaced by buses or closed entirely. By the mid-20th century, cities like Los Angeles and Chicago, once with hundreds of kilometers of interurban lines, had completely dismantled their networks. But in Katowice, things took a different turn. After the Second World War
came the Soviet era, when urban planners embarked on massive urban renewal projects, destroying the old growth driven by the interurban.
Now, under public ownership, Katowice's network of interurbans were thrusted into a new role, helping the city accommodate its explosive suburban growth.
The population exploded around tram lines, and giant new apartment buildings pushed the tram and interurban beyond its intended capacity.
The economic conditions of the time also severely limited car ownership. Automobiles were expensive and often scarce due to production constraints and import limitations. The public depended heavily on mass transit for daily commuting, keeping interurbans alive. After the fall of communism in the late 80s,
ridership on Katowice's interurban network started to dwindle, making further investment in this network difficult to justify. It spiraled further and further into decline. Lines were closed and service was shifted towards faster and cheaper buses. In the early 2010s, an injection of EU funding kickstarted a massive modernization program, an attempt to revitalize the system for the 21st century. Included were a new, accessible low-floor trams, more intuitive passenger wayfinding, and completely rebuilt sections of the track. Despite this, Katowice's interurbans have been losing ridership every year since its peak in 1983. This isn't solved with shiny new trams or fancy new stops. The interurban itself is fundamentally flawed.
Unlike the dense tram networks of Zurich or Prague, Katowice's interurbans focus on far-flung suburban commuters, failing to serve short, inner-city trips.
The individual interurban services branch out and serve suburban areas with infrequent trains, every 15 to 20 minutes or worse.
At the same time, their slow speeds and closely spaced stops makes transit uncompetitive with the automobile on longer suburban journeys.
Unlike trains, trams do not necessarily have their own right-of-way and share lanes with general traffic. It's a Frankenstein of sorts. It's neither effective at providing greater inner-city coverage for local trips, nor is it fast enough to serve long-distance regional trips.
At the end of the day, these are local trams meant to serve trips within cities. They are far too slow to serve trips outside the city as they do today.
"50 years on, the Katowice region is growing again. A revitalized Polish economy has driven higher density development, increasing road congestion. It's clear that public transport is required to meet the needs of the region, but the legacy network of interurban lines, many that built the sprawling city a century prior, are no longer competitive in the modern age." Recognizing this, Poland is now investing 1.6 billion euros into the region's mainline railways, with the hope that it emerges as a fast, high-capacity competitor to the private automobile. With fully integrated fares and ticketing, the bus, tram, and train can begin working together as a single network, enabling the city's interurbans to take on a new life as a first and last-mile local connector. And for the first time in 75 years, Katowice is expanding the coverage of its tram network, not outward, but within the city itself. Since their inception, the Silesian interurbans have been pivotal in shaping the geography of Katowice and its metropolitan area. Whether they will succeed in their new role remains to be seen, but their continued evolution reflects the region's aspirations for a sustainable and connected future.
All work, no pleasure. I ain't here to make friends, big stepper. Bad guy, Heath Ledger. Ready for whatever, I'll be front and center. Stick around when we hold it down, look at what we found. This a marathon, not a sprint, let's go on.